Hello, counselors. Welcome to another movie review. In 1962, Universal released the horror thriller Cape Fear. Based off of the novel The Executioners, the film centered around an ex-con named Max Cady, who, once released from prison, starts stalking the family of Sam Bowden, the lawyer who was responsible for putting him away. The movie was exciting, suspenseful, and particularly disturbing for its time. Despite that, though, it was still a massive success. It seemed like the kind of movie that, if remade, it would probably be done very poorly. But then, in 1991, Martin Scorsese, one of cinema's most celebrated filmmakers, directed what many consider to be a superior remake. It too was a major success, even having a Simpsons episode that parodied it. So, the question is, which version of Cape Fear do I think is better? Well, that's what I'm here to determine. This is Cape Fear 1962 versus Cape Fear 1991. The hero. The hero in both versions of Cape Fear is Sam Bowden. In the original, he's played by Gregory Peck, who interestingly played another lawyer the exact same year as Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird. Huh, how about that? Peck plays him as a very typical American hero. He's suave, well-spoken, intelligent. He has a very happy and successful life. He's the kind of person for you to root for. I must give Gregory Peck mad props. He has a great presence to him, and whenever he's on screen with Robert Mitchum, the fun is firing on all cylinders. In the remake, Sam is played by Nick Nolte, who also does a very good job. But when it comes to the character, he's a little more gray. He still is generally a pretty good person, but his relationship with his family is, well, a little more dysfunctional. Of course, there's also the setup for Max Cady's motivation. In the original, Max Cady attempted to rape a woman and Sam stopped him, then testified against him in court and had him sent to prison. In the remake, Sam was actually Max's lawyer, who was supposed to protect him, but once he found out what he had done, he sold him out and buried the information that could have saved Max. And while you can certainly understand why he did this, it was still his job as a lawyer to protect his client. In both versions, Sam is very conflicted about killing Max. In the original, there is more emphasis put on the fact that this is what Max wants. He wants Sam to go against his own morals. But the thing is, in the original, you never really get the vibe that Sam is actually going to do it. There is one really nice moment where he takes his gun and walks outside with the intent of hunting Max down and killing him. But he quickly puts himself back together and realizes that he can't do that. But with Nick Nolte's Sam, you get the vibe that he would actually kill Max if he had to. Let's also talk about the way that both of their stories end. In the original, Sam overpowers Max, and Max pretty much tells him to go ahead and kill him. But Sam realizes that that's what Max wants, and that frankly, it's too kind of a punishment for him. He instead tells him that he's going to send him back to jail, but this time for life. The speech that he gives to Max here is really badass.
You're strong, Katie. You're gonna live a long life in a cage. That's where you belong. And that's where you're going. And this time, for life. Bang your head against the walls. Count the years, the months, the hours, until the day you rot.
If somebody said that to me, I would shit myself. In the remake, however, Sam actually does kill Max. And while obviously he was a terrible person, it's still murder. And as we see, through some admittedly very on-the-nose symbolism, Sam now has blood on his hands. And things won't ever really be the same with him ever again. Gregory Peck is great. I could listen to his voice all day. And you really do root for him to defeat Max. But Nick Nolte's Sam Bowden is just a much more interesting character. A more complex one. So the point goes to the remake. On to round 2, the supporting cast. Both of these movies have a fair share of supporting characters. For example, there's the detective who is hired to follow Max. In the original, he's played by Telly Savalas, and in the remake, he's played by Joe Don Baker. Both actors who have been in James Bond movies. While I do like Telly Savalas, I think Joe Don Baker definitely is the better of these two. Telly Savalas plays him as pretty much your typical serious detective. Joe Don Baker, on the other hand, actually does sneak in some genuinely funny lines. What about the woman who is beaten by Max Cady? Well, once again, both versions are very good. Both of them seem very helpless and confused, and you really feel sorry for them after Max hurts them. I think if I had to choose, I would have to go with the girl in the remake. She just seems more damaged and more sympathetic. Part of that is due to the fact that she is hurt a lot more badly in the remake than she is in the original. The most important supporting characters are obviously the wife and daughter. In the original, the wife is played by Holly Bergen, and in the remake, she's played by Jessica Lange. I'm gonna sound like a broken record here, but they're both very good. In the remake, however, there is certainly a lot more conflict between her and her husband, including her believing that her husband had an affair with the woman who was beaten by Katie. In the original, they get along pretty much fine. But ultimately, Jessica Lange is just the far more strong-willed of the two. And of course, we have the daughter. In the original, she's played by Laurie Martin, and in the remake, she's played by Juliette Lewis. Now, admittedly, Laurie Martin was a lot younger when she made this movie. And so because of that, it makes the scene where Max attempts to rape her all the more uncomfortable. Under normal circumstances, a scene being uncomfortable would be a bad thing, but seeing how that was clearly the intent, it really does work. And because she's so much younger, she just seems all the more vulnerable to him. Laurie Martin does a pretty good job for the most part, although she does have a couple over-the-top acting moments. But she is a kid, and it was the 60s, so it's a minor nitpick. Throughout the entire movie, she looks at Max Cady with nothing but fear and hatred. On the other hand, in the remake, the daughter actually kind of likes Max at first. In the scene where they talk to each other at the theater, Max is able to get inside of her head and realize that she isn't happy. Max seems to be giving her the support that she was looking for with her parents, but never got. However, by the end of the movie, she realizes that he is truly nothing but a psychopath, and sets his face on fire. So ultimately, I am going to give the point once again to the remake. The supporting cast in it are just a lot more interesting and memorable. And now we come to the big one, the villain. Indeed, Max Cady is the main reason why both of these movies are remembered. A living embodiment of evil. A man who thinks he is completely in the right for what he does, and will not stop until his mission is accomplished. Both of these actors do an excellent job playing him. When it comes to their performances and characters, though, there are certainly some differences. In the original, Robert Mitchum plays Max. His performance is very similar to that of an old, eccentric uncle. The one who seems like a nice guy, but has something a little bit off about him, and is clearly hiding some dark secrets. From his appearance, Mitchum certainly looks like a normal, everyday guy. Suave, tall, handsome. I especially like some of his clothing. His white jacket and his Panama hat. And when it comes to the way that he talks, he pretty much always keeps his voice calm. Even when he gets angry, his voice never really rises too high. He talks to Sam over the phone about murdering his family like he's talking about the weather forecast. Often the scariest moments with him are the moments when he doesn't talk at all, and he just stares at you. Because while his tone of voice might not tell you his true nature, one look at his face and you know that whatever is underneath that skin is pure evil. When it comes to his motivation, it is pretty simple. He attempted to rape a woman, but Sam stopped him and sent him to prison. Now he blames Sam for losing 8 years of his life. He's the kind of guy who blames everybody but himself. He even goes as far as telling Sam that it's his fault that his wife left him.
One wife and one kid. That's what I had when you sent me up. She dumped me. Never even visited. I signed the divorce papers.
What did you expect?
Oh, no, it wasn't that. It was the prison rap that she couldn't take. She just couldn't stand the disgrace. And that was your doing, counselor, not my doing.
What an asshole.
He is truly a loathsome character, and you just want to step right into the movie so you can beat the shit out of him. Robert De Niro's Max Cady, on the other hand, is a little different. When it comes to his appearance, he does look a little bit more like a crazy person. At least to me. Especially with that hair. When it comes to his motivation, however, it is a lot more interesting. Because in the remake, Sam actually kind of did something wrong. He betrayed his client, who he was supposed to protect. Max even openly says that he isn't going after the judge or the DA because they did their jobs just fine. But Sam didn't do his.
I mean, why me? Look, I was your lawyer. I defended you. I mean, why not badger the DA or the judge?
Badger.
Yeah, well, why not then? Well, why not then?
Badger. Best I remember, they was just doing right by their jobs.
Oh, I didn't do my job.
So that does add something interesting to Max's character. While Mitchum was very calm and understated, De Niro is a little more loud and bombastic. He still has his quiet moments, but he has other moments where he really raises his voice. So we have two really great villains. Which one is better? Well, once again, from a motivational standpoint, there is more going on with De Niro's Cady. He sees himself as a soldier for God, a man who must punish people for their sins. Despite this, though, there is a certain level of hypocrisy to him, like when he says this.
I mean, we all make mistakes, Danielle. You and I have, but at least we try to admit it.
Not really. Does he ever express any regret over raping those girls? No, not really. Plus, there's the fact that many religious people believe that God would simply punish the sinners himself. Yet Cady feels the need to essentially play God. Ultimately, he uses his religion to hide the fact that underneath he is nothing more than an angry, vengeful psychopath. Both Cadys I would love to just smack in the face. But when it comes to which one I would want to do it more to, I would have to go with Mitchum, particularly for this bit, where he talks about blackmailing his wife, who divorced him after he went into prison, by forcing her into writing a love letter to him, which he then threatened to show to her new husband, making him think that they were having an affair. He then used it to blackmail her into having sex with him. But ultimately, if I had to choose which one I liked more, and I do, I would have to say Robert Mitchum. And that's really because of how much more unpredictable he is, due to his more calm and understated performance. Due to the fact that he never raises his voice, you get the feeling that this is a man who is in complete control. A man who knows that he is going to come out on top, or at least strongly believes that he will. Everything psychotic and crazy about him comes solely through his actions. What he does, what he says. Just compare their introduction scenes. Mitchum is introduced walking through the street like a normal everyday man. He doesn't seem like someone to fear at first. But then he stares at a bunch of young women coming out of a building. That's the first hint that this isn't just a normal man. Then, walking up some stairs, he knocks down a woman's book. And he doesn't even look back at her. This instantly makes us not like him. Then he is shown watching Sam in court, and just from the look that he gives him, we can tell that he doesn't like him. It's an excellent way of introducing us to this villain. In the remake, on the other hand, the introduction is a little more on the nose. Max is shown in his cell doing exercises. He's got all these crazy tattoos on him. He's in prison, so we know that he's not a good person already. It just doesn't have the same level of subtlety as the original Cady's introduction. And when De Niro goes over the top, he really goes over the top. It's still entertaining and fun to watch, but it's not as scary. Mitchum is genuinely terrifying. He never raises his voice, he always stays in control. He doesn't even need to say a word, but he can still send shivers down your spine. Look at this moment where he closes in on the daughter. She holds up a weapon to protect herself, and he just gives her this look like, come on, put it down. You know you don't have it in you. The only time in the original where Katie legitimately snaps is at the very end, when Sam tells him that he's sending him back to prison for life. And you can see on Katie's face that for the first time in the movie, he is genuinely terrified. It's an extremely satisfying moment. So, yeah, ultimately, Mitchum is the winner here. He's just more subtle, more threatening, and more loathsome. Now on to the technical aspects. From a directing standpoint, both of these movies are very well made. Martin Scorsese is naturally one of the great directors of cinema, and he really does bring his A-game to the remake. Sadly, the film doesn't really have many of the long tracking shots that he was very well known for in films like Goodfellas. But still, it's a very well shot movie. The original Cape Fear was directed by J. Lee Thompson, who obviously is not nearly as famous a director. But despite that, he did a great job as well. I've heard some people say that the original Cape Fear comes off like a discount Hitchcock movie, but I really don't get that. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Hitchcock himself directed this movie. I think it holds its own against many of his best movies, like Psycho, Vertigo, and Strangers on a Train. Something that I especially love about the original is that it's in black and white. The original really showed to me how well thrillers can work in black and white. The director said that he chose to make the original in black and white because he thought it would fit the tone a lot better, and I really do agree with him. The fact that there's no color in the movie really adds to the dark, sinister tone of it all. The film has a wonderful use of shadows and dark lighting, particularly near the climax. You get shots like this with Max Cady shrouded in the darkness, or this with the reflection of the water projected over our characters. Black and white cinematography can really work in these kinds of movies. The remake looks very good too, but the fact that it's in color just doesn't work as well for this kind of story. Again, I would like to stress, Scorsese did a great job directing it. From an editing standpoint, both of these films are very well edited. And then you have the musical score. In the original, the music was done by the legendary Bernard Herrmann, who delivers a truly spectacular soundtrack. The main theme is one of my favorites in any movie, and it really captures the spirit of Max Cady. Dark, sneaking, conniving. Bernard Herrmann was the go-to guy to make suspenseful music. Even Scorsese realized how perfect the music score in the original Cape Fear was because he brought it back in the remake. He got Elmer Bernstein to redo many of Bernard Herrmann's tracks, and they sound great. The only real problem I have with the music in the remake is that the main theme is really overused. The original movie uses the theme at the beginning and at the end. Simple. The remake uses it quite a few more times, and sometimes the music just comes off as intrusive, particularly when they play it over the 4th of July parade scene. Not only does it kind of spoil the fact that Katie is going to show up here, but it's just too loud. They should have used some of the more quiet, suspenseful music over this scene. And the theme comes back a couple more times in the remake. I think it's a good example of there being too much of a good thing. The theme is amazing, but it works a lot better at just the beginning and the end. Ultimately, I'm going to give the point to the original here. As well made as the remake is, the original just has better cinematography, better atmosphere, and better music. Now we come to the last round, the story. Both of these movies follow along the same basic storyline. The major differences come with Katie's motivation, Katie's fate at the end of the movie, Sam's relationship with his family, and the tone and violence. I've already talked about several of those differences before, so I want to zero in on the tone. The original Cape Fear is a pretty realistic movie. The remake, on the other hand, while still fairly realistic, does stretch things a little bit farther. And some of these stretches do rub me the wrong way a little bit, like Max Cady following them by hanging onto the bottom of their car, or Max being horribly burned right in his face, but still going on like it's nothing. I don't know, it just seems a little slasher villain-like to me. There are also things like the violence. The original leaves a lot of the violence up to the imagination, which I think works very well. The scene where Katie beats the girl, we just see him grab her as she tries to escape, and that we don't really see the details of what he does to her. In the remake, we do see a little bit more of the details, and it's pretty disturbing. Again, this is understandable, this is a Scorsese movie after all, but I do think that less is more in this case. What about the suspense factor? Well, both of these movies are very suspenseful and scary. But in terms of which one did it better, I'd have to say the original. Not to say that there aren't some scary moments in the remake, there are. But I think the fact that Mitchum is just a more scary villain, and also the atmosphere and black and white cinematography, all of that really comes together to make the original more scary. One of my favorite scenes in the original is the scene where the daughter is running from Max. You really feel her fear and panic in this moment. With that said, the remake does make a lot of things in the story more interesting, like Max's motivation, and the character of Sam Bowden himself. So again, choosing which film is better is very tricky. You have one film that is extremely effective and scary, but very simple, and another one that is a lot more complex, but more stylized and over the top. And if I had to choose, and obviously I do, I would have to go with the original Cape Fear. As much as I do love the remake, I will admit that it just doesn't match the same level of, well, for lack of a better term, fear that the original film invokes. The original Cape Fear is simple but incredibly effective, and this is best shown by the climax. The original Cape Fear has a very good final showdown between Sam and Max. We get a fist fight, ending with Sam hitting Max in the head with a rock, and a great moment of suspense where Max chases after Sam and Sam has to get his gun. And he just manages to get it, defeating Max. It's a very simple climax, but it is very, very exciting. The climax of the remake, on the other hand, just has too much going on. You have Max trying to get Sam to confess inside of the boat, there's a storm outside, then the boat crashes and breaks apart. Max starts speaking in tongues before he dies, which is really goofy. I'm not sure if they intended this moment to be funny, but it doesn't really work for me. The original Cape Fear just feels more real, and that's why I like it better. It's simple, sure, but it doesn't need to be complex in order to be a great movie. Again, I love the remake. It's one of my favorite remakes, and one of my favorite movies of Martin Scorsese's. But ultimately, the original Cape Fear is the better movie. Let me know which Cape Fear movie you think is better. Have a good day, and
I'll see you around, Counselor.